It's a long time, isn't it? I mean, all the evidence was there when the wall came down in 1989. Our president of the time and the IOC just really did not want to face this horrible period of time where they allowed this to happen, because there were always two types of victims. There were people like myself that, didn't win medals that maybe they should have done. And there were those East German athletes, those young girls that were given terrible drugs throughout puberty, which has terrible long-term side effects. And many of them are ill now. And in fact, some of them have even died. So this is a horrible period of history, which at long last, our new president of FINA has decided to look into, to apologize for, and hopefully to make some compensation for.
I mean, Petra Schneider's, spoken about it, and you've met her and seen her. But at the time, were you aware this was going on?
Yes, absolutely, 100%. This isn't something which was happening. We were going, oh, aren't we surprised that 11 of the 13 gold medals at the Moscow Olympic Games went to East German athletes in the women's races, but not a single man won a medal. I mean, it was very, very obvious. They had young girls that would appear on international scenes. We'd never seen them as a junior. We'd never heard of them before, and they would just smash world records. They looked and sounded very masculine. They had very big masculine development, and they were incredibly successful only in the women's races. It was just so frustrating. My dad would often speak about it. He was my coach at the time. And because he would speak about it, he was never selected as an international coach, even though he had the most number of medalists on that particular team. So it was very frustrating. I won a silver medal, so people know who I am, but there were British people that were fourth behind 3 East Germans and nobody knows their name. And that's very, very wrong.
Because they should have had a gold as well, obviously. I mean, what difference would it have made to you having your gold and not a silver?
There's a big difference, isn't there, between being an Olympic silver medalist and being an Olympic champion. It would have been lovely. At times it would be great if I was away at the Olympics. I remember when Becky amazingly won her 2 golds in Beijing back in 2008, and everyone was very excited. And they constantly referred to the last time a British girl won a medal, which was in the 60s, won a championships. And that was hard to deal with when we knew categorically what was going on. We had all the Stasi evidence. We knew exactly what they were taking, when they were taking it. So I think I'm the last person to say that I want anyone to turn up on anyone's door and take their medals away. I think what should happen now is that the record books should be changed and that new medals maybe should be issued. But those girls were also victims of the system, and that needs to be acknowledged, and it never needs to happen again.
And looking at the reasons why it was happening, or why it wasn't tackled, I mean, was it just because people didn't want to go back to those Cold War times and it was something that had happened in the past and they just didn't want to talk about it? Or was it something, do you think, fundamentally wrong with the governing body of swimming?
Not just swimming. It wasn't just swimming. Swimming was one of the worst sports affected, but also it happened a lot in track and field. It happened in rowing. The great Kathy Cook was one of the most amazing British athletes ever. She held the 400-meter record up until recently when Christina Horrigu beat it. And yet most people, again, do not know who Kathy Cook is. So it's by far not just a swimming problem, but I'm very proud that FINA, the swimming body now, are the first to actually say we want to do something serious about this. It was endemic. They had East German doctors sitting on the International IOC Olympic doping panel, which is ridiculous. And in fact, they even have awards still in place for people that were given a criminal record after the wall came down, who forced these young girls to take these terrible drugs. So something has to be done to remove those people and acknowledge what actually happened.
You talked about the girls and the terrible legacy it has had on them. How are many of them managing? Because I imagine that you still have contact with these people that you spent time with when you were younger.
Yeah, not too much contact, a little bit. I did a documentary in 1990 when I met Petra. She was quite poorly then. She was only quite young. I remember I took my little girl with me who was 3 months old, and that was great. And she's now 23. And she got very upset because she couldn't have any more children and she was already on heart pills. And in fact, we've seen a few of the East German females actually die since then. So, it was very dire what actually happened. And I'm hoping that FINA will clear the whole house up. We've unfortunately had a president in place who wasn't always looking at putting the athletes first and center, which is what's most important. It was often about what's the best hotel they can stay in, how much money can the association make. And sport has to be about the athletes. And it would be really wonderful to see that this has been sorted out, and it would give the right message that cheating with drugs or any form of cheating is not to be accepted, and when they find out, they will do something about it.
In terms of the people that were affected, it was, as you say, it was the women that took these drugs, and they were the ones that had all of these successes. Why do you think? Is there any element of sexism to that it was seen that the women could be meddled with, as it were, or do you think it just was simply the case that the drugs available for the male athletes just weren't as readily available, or perhaps weren't as effective?
No, it wasn't that it wasn't readily available. The male athletes were also given, additional testosterone. It's just if you put a young girl on testosterone through puberty, you can make a huge difference. So the difference between male and female performance at international level ranges from about 10% to 30%. So something like middle distance running is 10%, and something like weightlifting is over 30%, which is absolutely huge. So if you take 10% away from the girl that beat me, that was 16 seconds she'd been behind me. That wouldn't have even put her in the final. So it meant that they could take very average female athletes and give them male testosterone through puberty and make an absolutely huge difference. So they could dominate on the women's racing scene, but it would make very little difference to the men. Maybe they could, improve them by 1% or even 2% at the most, but then a very good male athlete would still beat an East German male athlete. Whereas with the women, we could not make up 10, 15, 20%. It was impossible.
What about the sport now? How clean is it, do you think?
Sport is always fighting this battle. This battle's never going to go away, because sport, like life, people will try to cheat the system. And when money is involved and success is involved, then of course people are going to try to beat. The message that we have to give them is that we're not going to tolerate it. We're going to find better ways all the time to catch cheats. We're going to find bigger deterrents. I would like to see bans come into place, and then, if you've caught a second time, that's it. You're trying to cheat the system again and you've not learned your lesson. So I think we need to have better deterrents in place. And obviously we are holding samples now and post-testing, and then, reiterating and reallocating medals. You can never give someone back their moment. We can't. There was a fantastic swimmer called Ann Osgerby, and she was fourth in the 100 meters at the 1980 Olympic Games. You do not know her name, and her whole life would have probably been different if she'd been Olympic champion. We're never going to be able to give that back to Ann, but if we can at least acknowledge her and put those updated results in the books, it's better late than never.